Please be seated. Zita will read our scripture this morning. Zita, thank you.
Our scripture today comes from 1 Samuel 2:12 through 23. Now the sons of Eli were worthless. They had no knowledge of the holy God. The practice of the priest toward the people was, when any woman or man sacrificed an offering, the priest's boy came while the meat was boiling with a three-pronged fork in his hand. Then he violently shoved it into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot, and all that the fork brought up, the priest took for himself. This is what they did to all the women and men of Israel who came there to Shiloh. Even more, before the fat was burned to smoke, the priest's boy came and said to the one who was sacrificing, "Give up some meat to roast for the priest, for he will not accept boiled meat from you, only fresh." And if the woman or man said to him, "Let him burn the fat to smoke first, and then take for himself what you wish," he would say, "No, now you will give it, and if not, I will take it by force." Thus the sin of Eli's boys was very great in the sight of the Holy One of old, for the men treated the offerings of the Most High with contempt. Now Eli was very old. He heard that all that his sons were doing to Israel, and how they laid the women who were stationed at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He said to them, "Why do you do these things? I'm hearing evil things from all these people." "No, my sons, it is not a good report that I'm hearing the people of the Holy One of Sinai passing around." This is the word of the Lord.
This morning's sermon is based upon 1 Samuel chapter 2, and it is taken from a lectionary that was compiled by the Reverend Dr. Wilda Gaffney. Dr. Gaffney is a womanist theologian, so she is a black woman. She is an ordained Episcopal priest. She is a theologian, and she has done a lot of work lifting up lifting up women in the Bible, lifting up women when they have been invisibilized, when their voices have not been heard. So she is a Hebrew Bible scholar, and so the translation that I'm using is her translation, because her translation often opens up some things that might not be immediately obvious. But this is a very obvious kind of text, isn't it? The sons of Eli were jerks, is basically what it boils down to. They were corrupt fools. The text lays it out right there. Completely lost in lustful appetites, greed, and the intoxication of power. The people representing God were completely lost in lustful appetites, greed, and the intoxication of power. How little things change over time. Because the language of this text itself is violent language. It really is. It says that the priest's servant violently shoved the fork into the pan. So it's letting us know that this was, it wasn't like, oh, let me get a little taste. It's like, let me get in there and stick it, right? He shoved it violently into the pan, and whatever the fork brought up, the priest took for himself. And so you know that all that violent shoving wasn't just to get a little tidbit, right? You were going for the good stuff. And when the worshipers asked him, well, can you at least wait until the fat has burned away? Because according to their culture, the fat was the portion that belonged to God. You know, in ancient cultures, fat in animals was very treasured because it had the most energy to it, right? And so when they were making their sacrifices in the temple, of course, the fat was burned for God. And so they said, well, you know, okay, you're sticking your fork in, you're taking meat out before it's ready, but can you at least leave it in the fire until the fat burns away? And the answer was no. Now, give it to me, or I will take it by force. There are factions in our nation, Christian factions, who unfortunately are ready to take things by force. And they've made that very clear. Everything became an object for these three brothers in positions of religious authority to exploit for their own enjoyment. They exploited the sacrifice. They exploited the worshipers. They exploited the sacred office which they held. And even the women stationed at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Because it says, when they were talking about the women, it doesn't even say they lay with the women, right? Because lay with, which is a term that is often used in the Bible for people, you know, who are having sexual activity, it implies some degree of commonality, some humanity. You lay with someone. But the way that this verse is written, it just says they lay the women. Objectification. Objectification, even if they're talking about, inappropriate sexual contact. They lay the women at the entrance to the tent of meeting. These men robbed God. They robbed the people. They exploited the vulnerable. And the people knew that this was happening, but they did not have the power to correct it. And the sons of Eli did not care to correct it. They were drunk with proximity to holiness while having no knowledge of a holy God and what it means to love God's people. When I encountered this text this week, I couldn't escape how much the sons of Eli resemble the actions of the most extreme factions of the church today. The factions that are getting access to the media, the factions who have the microphone, the factions who stand around a president and bless his corruption. We have seen this propensity of prosperity teaching that preys on people's desperation, that allows those in power to exploit them financially, while then telling them, well, if you aren't benefiting financially in the same way, it's probably because of something you've done. It's because you have sin in your life. It's because you haven't been blessed by God, which was, by the way, the prevailing belief back during this biblical time. If you were rich, it was because God had blessed you. So we've seen this propensity for prosperity preaching. We've heard the reports, I've read far too many of them, of sexual exploitation and cover-ups in the church. The SBC has had, over 800 reported cases and has a history of covering things up. We know that the Catholic Church does too. And it happens everywhere, but especially in high control spaces where you are taught to obey and not to question. So we know about the sexual exploitations and cover-ups and the unwillingness to admit the harm that was inflicted on people. We have watched these financial scandals unfold. And we have seen religious fear and legalism used to keep people silent and compliant. And right now, again, there is a drive to silence even more people. Whether it is immigrants, silenced, gathered up, and taken away, and nobody knows where they are, incarcerated without due process. We have seen LGBTQ protections being rolled back again and again and again, and a lot of those are not in the headlines, but they are happening nonetheless. We've seen attacks on people of color. We see what is going on here, and we also have seen how capitalism, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with capitalism, but unfettered capitalism that has no moral center, how it can turn to greed and harm. And we've seen faith communities, too many of them, align themselves with the rich and powerful while neglecting the poor, the wounded, and the vulnerable. That's not what Jesus did. That's not what Jesus envisioned his church to be. But this is what happens when people know the rituals but do not know the heart of God. And there are some people I know who are of a more conservative bent who would say that I don't know God, that we don't know God, because we do welcome and affirm LGBTQ people, because we do seek to see the face of God in every person that we encounter. They would say that we are not the Christians. They can say it till the cows come home. Amen. Okay. But we follow the way of love. We follow in the footsteps of Jesus. Some people can stand at the altar and still be far from God. They can wear the sacred garments and still treat sacred things with contempt. Or you can wear street clothes and treat sacred things as precious. It doesn't matter what you're wearing. They can speak religious language and still practice exploitation. This text does not let us pretend that abuses of power are new, because this is an old text, and if you take out Twitter and, Truth Social and a couple of things, it's like the same thing is happening today as happened then. This is a moral character problem. And the ability and the refusal to accept that people are made in the image of God, and as we honor them, we also honor God. So this text does not pretend that abuse of power is new. It actually names it plainly. And it shows us that God sees it, God grieves it, and God will not ignore it forever. Because before this chapter, we read the story of Hannah, who gave birth a miraculous birth to a young boy named Samuel, whom she then dedicated to the temple. And so that young boy was Eli's assistant, even though Eli was old. And so God was already working in Samuel, calling Samuel's name to prepare him to speak to the people, to bring hope and vision to the people. So while the guys up at top were doing all of their bad, evil stuff, there was another young boy, right, whom God was calling by name to come and to liberate his people. So in times like these, we must hold to what we know is right and refuse to let corruption control our spirits. And what I mean by that is refuse to let the corruption or whatever is going on at the top, refuse to allow that to steal our joy. Refuse to allow that to blind us to the presence of God that is around us every day. We cannot allow them to steal our joy. We cannot allow them to make us feel disempowered, because our power comes from God, and we walk together. And so we hold on to what we know is right. And we refuse to let that corruption overtake our spirits or make us feel hopeless and despondent. We refuse to allow the failures of those in power to steal our capacity for worship, for joy, for community, and for hope. As the old song says, oh, they can't take that away from us. And oppressed people throughout history have found that one of the most powerful tools that they have is their capacity to experience joy, their capacity to celebrate one another, and their capacity to realize that amazing things can happen even at humble levels. When we wake up and we gather to worship, even just this little handful of us at this moment, we are creating something together. We are taking on the mantle of being co-creators with God as we understand that God's joy manifests through us. God's love manifests through us. God's liberation manifests through us. We are in this with God. We are declaring that this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it, and there's not a doggone thing that you can do about it. Said, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me, and the world can't take it. It can make it a little harder. It can make it very uncomfortable, but they do not have the capacity to crush our spirits. And as we come together here, we also rejoice in our bodies, as many bodies are being demonized. We rejoice in our bodies just as they are. In every wrinkle, in every sag, every little hip ache even that reminds us that we're still alive, that we're still even able to move, we rejoice in our capacity to be mobile in whatever way that we can. So we rejoice in the wrinkles and the sags. We rejoice in the muscles too, but some of us got more sags than muscles right now. That's okay. We give thanks every day for love and laughter, for hands that touch us with care, for arms that encircle us, for text messages that cheer us, for friends and family who can cry with us when we cry, can comfort us when we need comforting, can sit with us when we just need a companion, and can laugh with us when we're ready to laugh again. So we give thanks for the goodness that is still at work in this world, and that is what we stand upon, the love of God that is still at loose in this world, that nothing can take away. So we give thanks for every small voice that dares to speak up, every person who speaks a word of encouragement when they could just as easily have kept their mouth shut. Every small act of service and sacrifice. That's why I say it's like our missions projects might seem small to some, but we know what we give to do it, and we know that someone out there will be blessed by our giving. We give thanks for every ordinary kindness that refuses despair. There are days when I sit in my house, I know everybody does this sometime, and the news is just so bad, right? And my personal life doesn't seem to be going, it's like we all have medical issues or different things. And so it's just sometimes when it's like I can feel myself just feeling weighted down, But then, thanks be to God, something comes and says, okay, you need to wake up, right? You need to shake this off. You need to reach out and touch someone. You need to reach out and show somebody love. You can't allow them to win. In all of these things that I talked about that we do as a community and in our own spiritual lives, it is in those things that the love of Christ manifests. And it is in those things that our hope resides, even when it feels like we don't have a whole lot of control over what's going on up here. Because, beloved, as I close, I just want to remind you that God is raising up new voices. We are entering a prescient moment. We see that things are moving towards something, though we can't say yet what. The empire is eroding, just like the Roman Empire did, and basically every other empire does eventually. The rot and corruption are clearly visible. And those that are in power are not even trying to hide their intentions anymore. It's becoming more and more blatant. We don't have to guess. It's right there in front of us. But I declare to you today, as I close, God is already at work. We don't see it, but somewhere there are young leaders that are being nurtured in unlikely places. Somewhere there's a church that is preaching real history to people, as we see history being distorted in many of our social places. Somewhere the poor are speaking up and organizing and are beginning to realize that all of this talk about race and everything is just a smokescreen to divide those who are being exploited. That is happening on a grassroots level. Women are throwing off what has muffled them for generations. And that means that some women are walking away from denominations that will not recognize their calls to ministry. They're walking away from faith communities that encourage them to stay in abusive relationships because God hates divorce. And despite the teaching that they have grown up under, they are realizing that does not speak life. And they are walking away. But the other question is, so where will they go now? The Spirit is moving in humble spaces, in repurposed spaces, in safe and sheltering spaces. You know, I talk a lot of time about the hush arbors, and the slave church and everything. Like I said, they didn't meet in big, huge buildings and announce where they were. The work that they were doing, the work of liberation, of salvation, and of affirmation that they were doing, they did down in the bushes. Down in the bushes. That's where God was at work. The story of Eli's sons is not only a warning about corrupt power, it's also a reminder that while corruption is loud, God is still quietly preparing deliverance. While the sons of Eli abuse the sacred, young Samuel is growing in the temple. While the powerful take it by force, God is forming a child who will learn to listen. It happened with Moses. It's happened with Samuel. It happened with Jesus. It happened with Frederick Douglass. It happened with Harry. It's happened over and over and over again. God is forming a child who will learn to listen to the voice of God and who will speak life and liberation to God's people. So while exploitation seems to dominate the room, God is preparing another voice to say, "Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening." And it might not be any of us, but it might be someone we had to come into contact. It might not be any of us, but it might be someone's son. We just don't know what God has in store for God's people. So in closing, we remember today that this strange little space is the space that the Lord has made. We have consecrated it. We have sanctified it. It is not a space controlled by the greedy. It is not a space that has been surrendered to the violent. It is not a space that is defined by those who exploit what is holy. This is a space where I declare to you that God is still speaking, still healing, still forming communities of courage and care, whether it is our little church on Sunday morning, or whether it's a 12-step group later in the week, or whether it's an improvisation group, which is one of the things that actually can unlock creativity you never knew that you had. God is still speaking, healing, and forming communities of courage and care. And perhaps still raising up prophets from this very room. So let us rejoice this day and be glad in it together. Let us protect what is sacred. Let us protect each other because we are sacred. Let us continue to listen for God's voice. And let us become the faithful people that God is nurturing for such a time as this. As we say again, morning by morning, new mercies I see. Morris, are we set for the song?